Merdeka Award, an initiative to promote excellence by ExxonMobil, Petronas, and Shell.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Ng and welcome to the 11th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Our topic of discussion this time around is on enhancing collaboration between university and industry to spur innovation. Now, Malaysia has big ambitions to move up the value chain of a knowledge-based economy, and for that to happen, innovation has to lead the way for growth, and bringing together the industry and the academics is a key part to accelerating that process. And to join me in this discussion, I have a panel of experts. Please welcome, first and foremost, I have Dato' Nur Halim Yunus, the CEO of Malaysian Technology Development Corporation. Next to him, we have Birunta Moruti. She is a patent specialist and also the Vice President of Platcom Ventures. Next to me, I have Professor Dr. Ahmad Fauzi, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at University Technology Malaysia. Thank you for joining us. And we have also Mr. Mark Rosario, the CEO of National Innovation Agency, AIM. Last but not least, we have Johan Mahmud Merikan, who is the CEO of Talent Corp.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for making time for this discussion. Now, I'd like to start with understanding the overall innovation ecosystem in Malaysia. I think, Mark, you are the best person to kickstart that conversation. Now, what's your assessment of the current state of collaboration between the industry and the academics?
Well, there have been a lot of efforts in recent years to increase the level of collaboration between industry and academia. And we've seen a lot of large corporates, GLCs in particular, already have quite significant collaborations with universities. Some of the big ones, in fact, have their research facilities housed in university localities. And, but certainly there's always room to do more. And I think one of the areas that needs a lot more emphasis is to see how we can get more of our SMEs involved in the innovation landscape and working with universities. So in the last year or so, there's been a lot of effort on that. Quite a few initiatives have actually been started in that respect. I can mention a few. Platcom is one which was a collaboration between AIM and SME Corp, which is a commercialization platform which tries to link the research of IPs that are being generated in our universities with commercialization partners, as well as providing the help to take them through the various steps to commercialization. Then there's also the Public-Private Research Network, PPRN, which tries to have contract work done out by researchers from the universities. There's also Steinbeis, which is a German concept, but it provides a network of experts, not just in Malaysia, but also in over 50 countries, that provides this link to link experts to companies.
All right. So there seems to be quite a number of initiatives, especially from the government side, to initiate this kind of collaboration. But if, Dato', you can give us an overview, how do we fare in comparison to our peers in the region in terms of collaboration? Because I understand that commercialization rate of our ideas from university is still rather low at this point of time.
Well, we need to differentiate between commercialization and technology transfer. Because if you look at the engagement between universities and the industry, I think that there was a report, there was a number mentioned by the Ministry of Higher Education recently that the research universities, they have actually chalked up about 1.5 billion in terms of receipts for the engagement between universities and the industry. This is not commercialization. And again, these numbers, 1.5 billion for the past few years since we introduced the research universities, may have excluded quite a lot of other contracts which may have not passed through the official channel. So in terms of collaborating between the industry and the universities, I think that we have done well. But in terms of commercializing IPs and products which have been developed by universities. We may not have done as well as some other countries. But again, we need to look at what are the specific industries we're talking about. The established industries in Malaysia, for example, the plantation industries, oil palm industry, they may have better collaborations historically and now in terms of working with the universities. But the newer industries, or some of the industries that we are relatively new, they may have, they may not have the track record. So I would say that we will have to differentiate between commercialization of IP and between technology transfer. There is know-how and knowledge and technical expertise which are being provided by universities, especially like Professor Fauzi in his field of membrane technology. He has commercialized his technology in the form of product, but I'm sure he has done more in terms of actually transferring the know-how and the knowledge to the industry via collaboration with the industries.
Well, the idea of innovation at the end of the day is to have to bring your ideas and services into the market.
Right.
One of these big main reasons here. But what are some of the limitations that are hampering these efforts, particularly from the university side, Dato?
If you look at the triple helix, or if you like the quadruple helix, everybody has a role. Okay. Sometimes when we discuss about these issues of collaborating between academia and the industry, we always ask the academia. What have you done? What have you done? What have you done? For things to work, I would say that everybody has to play a role, both the academia and the industry. But okay, for the question of what the university have to do. When I started, or rather when we started MTDC in 1993, this idea of commercialization was very new. And most professors will tell you, why do I need to commercialize, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a thing that the university have to adapt with this new reality. One university which I can mention, because I work very closely with them, UKM, they started the ball rolling. Because the unit in charge of advisory at that particular university, they have a business mindset. We don't wait for the government link company to award us project. Mm-hmm. We're going to chase them.
Okay.
And this issue of chasing for business is sometimes can be foreign to academicians.
Okay. Now let's get to the university perspective then. Prof. Fauzi, I know you have done a lot in terms of research and also successfully commercializing your product. What are some of the limitations that you face from the university side to get your products out there?
There are a few aspects. Number one is the culture. Mm-hmm. As mentioned by Dato' Halim just now. Traditionally, the old mindset of academia is like that. Teaching, supervising, and to a certain extent, publication. But not that intensive for those days. But in the new academia realm at the moment, university lecturer, professor cannot be, think along that line anymore, because we are moving toward knowledge economy. Knowledge economy meaning that we can generate something that beneficial to the community, to the industry, and eventually the economy of certain countries. So in order to transform the knowledge and they become economy, this gap or bridge need to overcome the culture, the mindset. Number one is mindset. Number two, the knowledge from both parties, from universities like me, professors. Traditionally, we do not know how to approach the industry.
Like what he said, the business acumen.
Business, yeah. But on the other hand, the industry also, they will say, I do not know what university are doing or done so far. So these are knowledge. So what we need is engagement. Both parties sit down. And then the third one is product readiness. Traditionally, university research are very fundamentals. Mm-hmm. But now in the new economy era, we need applied. Not enough. Demonstration. Not enough until you can generate income from your products. Then the whole cycle of R&D and C completed. Now, the problem now is who is going to ensure that the cycle of R&D and C completed? Is it entirely depending on the university, or with the assistance from certain agency, government, or the industry that have vision and mission, to assist the university as well as certain country. And one more thing, whether I might be wrong, but this is my belief. Certain strategic research and development, especially conducted by international or multinational company, very rarely done it or have doing it in Malaysia. And this also need to be changed, the mindset, if they want to have a business in a country like Malaysia.
All right. Thanks, Prof. Fauzi. I have to take this discussion to our first commercial break, but when we come back, we also like to hear a bit more from the industry perspective. What do they want from the university? What kind of collaboration and how can we meet the needs of both sides of the divide? And that's coming up shortly after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the 11th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Our topic of discussion is on enhancing collaboration between university and the industry. Now, earlier, Prof. Fauzi, you mentioned that corporations tend to look abroad in terms of innovation, research and development. Now, for this aspect, I'd like to get to Johan, who works closely with employers, industries. Is our talent not good enough? I mean, why are people looking abroad?
No, but maybe just to pick up on some of the issues that have been discussed, when you talk about industry, academia, collaboration, it takes two to tango. It's almost like a marriage. You need both parties speaking a common language and understanding what each other wants and finding a ground to compromise. Now, Talent Corporation is quite focused in working with industry and also academia, particularly in the space of employability. In fact, we had collaborated with World Bank on a survey which we conducted and released in 2014. Now, one of the findings, and shall we say, let's start off on a glass half empty first. I mean, what it found was that there really wasn't enough of a conversation between industry and academia. And sometimes, picking up from what Dr. Halim mentioned, sometimes it's a case of there's a lot of ask but not translated to commitment. So, for example, employers surveyed had suggested that 80% of them wanted universities to change their curricula, and yet less than 10% actually were involved in that process. So it's one about asking, but then not following up. And I think what we've seen as changing, and I think we've seen a lot of efforts being done. I think, as Mark has mentioned, there's been a lot of effort being spearheaded by the government to promote greater industry academia collaboration. The higher education blueprint, I think, has highlighted a key focus on industry academia collaboration. There are lots of efforts. For example, there are efforts that's called like ICOEs. I think UTM has some. I know, for example, for RF, you have Keysight working with UMP. These are some of the initiatives where there are industry centers of excellence being established in different universities, focusing on core areas in order to then drive such collaborations.
So going back to what some of the things that Mark, you have mentioned earlier, we have the kind of collaboration, we have those policy framework in place, but why is it that still, like according to Prof. Fauzi, there are still a lot of room for improvement in terms of collaboration, for example, from the industry side? What kind of need, what can they take, what kind of things that we can do to incentivize them to collaborate further with the universities?
Well, there are a few things. One of them is in terms of tax incentives that are already available. There is recently there was new incentives for angel investors, where they would get a tax deduction for the losses incurred if they make an investment that doesn't turn out well. When you talk about angel investing, it's high risk. If you look at the funding landscape, where we have private equity, which looks typically at established companies, then you've got the VC space, which takes some risk, looking at startups, and then angel investors and seed investors looking much earlier on, and those are very high risk. So there needs to be more incentives for them to come in. So that came into play just about 1-2 years ago. And we need to see more of these sorts of investors coming in. Now, if you look at that landscape and you compare with countries like well, take Silicon Valley, for example. Why is there such a thriving angel investor network? It's because a lot of these investors are actually successful startups. You know, these are individuals who have made it big. And you know, the more you see of that, then the more you're going to see coming out of our landscape as well. In Malaysia, a lot of the successful entrepreneurs typically come from property development.
Okay.
So we need to see more coming from a technology background, and that's when you're going to see.
Yeah.
You know, bottom line is we need to see more success stories
Interesting you
coming
mentioned
up.
Silicon Valley, because a lot of these disruptive companies, their research, their fundamentals are based on the university. They are from Stanford, for example. So they have this innovation ecosystem, and is that a fair statement to say that we are still lacking? Maybe I can get to Abiru to talk about that.
Well, I'm of the opinion there's a gap between the industry and academia. I would just like to add on to what Prof mentioned and also Johan. There is another component that we are missing here in the whole ecosystem from the academia side, which is the Technology Transfer Office, because I believe that they are the connecting point for the university to the industry. So the lack of skills in our TTOs presently, from my experience dealing with universities and industries, I understand that our local TTOs or Technology Transfer Office is not well equipped, or they don't have the right skill set. And even if they train them in the technology transfer domain, there is a high turnover because these resources has to be shared. And so, you know, within a year or two, these officers that has been trained will be then placed in or housed in a different branch or offices, and therefore there's no continuous of pipeline from in terms of the IP churned out from the researchers or from the university. So when you don't have that clear communication from the university side, where the Technology Transfer Office plays a vital role in communicating or reaching out to the industry, so the industry is not well informed of what's available. So this also causes the lack of confidence from the industry side, because they still have not gained the trust or the confidence in our homegrown IPs compared to foreign IPs. So this is, I would say this is the missing gap.
Is that a mismatch of expectations and needs between both divides?
Yes, definitely, because both worlds they have different mindset, different expectation. From the academia side, they are very research driven. Okay, but it's good to see that now they are more market driven, you know, they are going into applied research. Whereas from the industry side, we tend to look at more of, they try to look into identifying profits, you know, innovation that has commercial potential. So yes, definitely there is a gap or mismatch in that sense.
Prof. Fauzi, you know, is it fair to say that university has lots of ideas, but they tend to be focused on getting into like top tier publications instead of actually getting those ideas into the market?
No, this issue is not about university alone. It is about the perception or the people perception from the stakeholders, you know. Traditionally, yes, university are producing talent for the needs of the industry and community. But let me briefly identify the gaps. For developed Western countries, casual communication, like Johan mentioned, is very highly regarded. You know, luncheon talk, you know, joint venture, research collaboration, research contract, very high. And university is a prime source for technology advancement. But coming back to Malaysia, the highest activity is training, you know, consultation. Lack of that. Just for information, yeah, university without high impact publication, you will go nowhere. Why we know Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford? Many of us have never been there, even for just one class. But from where we know that? We know that through the expertise that belong to the professors, the contribution from the innovative products to the community, to the whole world. So we cannot say split this. Okay, university have to tone down public. No, publication is the way forward. In fact, one of the criteria for developed nation is how much IP, how much publication, high impact publication. So our Ministry of Higher Education, Ministry of Kementerian Pengajian Tinggi Malaysia now, awarded 14 highly cited Malaysian scientists. And why we have to do that? Because we appreciate that. Majority of the product that well known in the market from the Western developed countries are through university R&D. That is why we cannot split this, and we need to enhance that.
And a lot of discussion about academia industry is always people's impression that there is none or there is low, but most people don't really know. So I think this is one of the points that we need to develop further, in the sense that how do we communicate the successful collaborations, because a lot of people don't know about it. I mean, Professor Fauzi's university has the top 2 centers in the world in terms of Scopus ranking. Yes, his own membrane research center, and the other one is on the vibration center. I'm not saying first in Asia, I'm saying first in the world. But how many people know that? Hardly any. So I think there is a need to communicate the successful ventures and achievement of our universities. Always when we talk about university, we say, oh, we are number 200, 300. Maybe that is not the way to present it to people you want to convince. Yeah? Because there are strength, there are pockets of strength within each universities. And we should actually promote this strength through the industry. And I think this communication of what we have achieved are probably not done very well by the universities, because by nature, they are not a marketing organization. But there are private partners, the GLCs, are also not doing it. I mean, there are so many GLCs in UTM, for example, since it is the only university represented here. But you hardly read about it in the papers. Yeah? So I think the first challenge would be to communicate and to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Yes. I mean, we have done a lot. I mean, if you look at our history, our industry, government, research institute collaboration in our oil palm industry is world class. Our industry, our oil palm industry would not have developed the way it has been, what they have achieved, if the government, the private sectors, the research institutes, and the entrepreneurs actually work together and develop the industry as a whole. Yeah? So, and people are aware of this, but when we talk about the oil palm industry, people never mention the contribution of the research institutes and the universities. So I think this is an issue of communication. Right?
I think you mentioned this is an issue of communication, also from the industry perspective, issue of confidence towards our products. I have to take this discussion for the next commercial break, but we'll be back shortly, so don't go away. Welcome back to the 11th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Our topic of discussion is enhancing collaboration between university and industry. And earlier we talked about how the private sector should take a bigger role in creating that synergy. Johan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree, Dr. Halim, that, success breeds success, and maybe some needs to be communicated better. But even coming back to this point, I think you had this conversation with Dr. Fauzi about whether incentives need to change, because I do still think that there still needs to be a balance. Universities, at the end of the day, yes, they are centers of research, but they're also, one of their key roles or key product is to produce talent. And I think that is where sometimes we struggle, because I think local universities there is still a perception issue, partly due to the perception of employers on our local graduates. And you see that even though unemployment in Malaysia is generally low at 3%, but when you dissect that, in the youth unemployment is actually double digits because most of the unemployed are amongst the youth, and based on Tracer studies, ministry says potentially up to 25% of our graduates are not getting employment within 6 months. I think there needs to be more being done to ensure that our graduates meet the needs of industry. And I see sometimes when you see private universities, obviously they're profit driven, and so they have to ensure that they produce talents that parents are willing to pay for, and I think they're quite focused on ensuring that they meet industry needs. You also see some of the GLCs which are quite industry based. So if you think of MMU, I think they've established themselves as obviously a university that really meets the needs of the ICT and telecommunications industry, both from talent production and also from research. And of course UTP, I think is also definitely a benchmark, University Technology Petronas. I think they're very much geared towards meeting the needs of the oil and gas industry. I mean, one simple thing in terms of a mismatch between industry and universities, many companies say, look, if you want to provide your young talent with good exposure into industry requirements, you need to give them a decent length of internship as industry exposure. Most universities now provide our engineers with probably, 10 weeks or 3 months, whereas at least UTP distances itself, it provides 7 months as an internship for its engineering undergraduates, ensuring that they get really good exposure. They're not just doing copy and photocopying, they're working on real projects, which really enables them to be ready. We need more and more of our universities really producing
We have
talent
5
that meets
research
industry.
universities. How are they contributing to the industrialization or commercialization of products?
Okay, just to add on to what Dato mentioned and Johan, in terms of reaching out or identifying the right talents or the expertise or the pipelines that these universities have and building the confidence of the industry, we need a neutral platform. So that's where government initiatives like Platform Ventures, the National IP Commercialization Arm, that facilitates end-to-end facilitation. We have AIM Steinbeis that sources for industry experts. So it's more like a matchmaking of industry experts. Then we have PPRN, we have CIRIM and Fraunhofer. So what I'm trying to say is these entities will work or will be ideal in terms of identifying the pipelines from the universities and establishing the confidence or the networks with the industry, because they are well positioned to do the outreach for these universities. Sometimes you can't blame the universities because you can't just say, oh, they're research driven, they don't know. Maybe the outreach isn't there. So you need platforms such as these initiatives to go out and reach out to the right parties.
I think other issue thing that brings up, you can't compare us with developed countries where they really have huge amounts of resources. I think Malaysia, given the size of our nation and economy, we need probably to, not to say pick winners, but we really need to prioritize our resources. I mean, one initiative that we've done on the electronic sector, again, in terms of promoting industry-academic collaboration, we recognize that electronics is a really big space. So we started off with a conversation in terms of having coordination between MIDA, Ministry of Education, and industry, to then say, okay, well, electronics is a big space, but Malaysia isn't in all spaces of electronics. So MIDA identified, going forward, what are probably the clusters within electronics that we focus on. So, for example, we have wafer fab, we have embedded systems, we have LEDs, we have these radio frequencies. These are some of the key subclusters that Malaysia's industry is working on, and we then need to ensure that our research and collaboration is aligned with our industrial master plans.
There is some criticism saying that our universities are not market-driven enough. Do you agree with that?
Well, one of the issues, if you look at research and IPs that are coming out of the universities and you ask industry to pick some of those IPs up and for commercialization, one of the issues is that a lot of the time, in terms of technology readiness, how ready it is, how close it is to commercialization, there still could be a lot of work that needs to be done. So another issue that needs to be looked at is the funding landscape. The funds that are provided to universities to do their research takes them up to a certain level. What about the next steps? All along the way, there's funding that's going to be required. So one of the things the government is doing now is looking at the whole funding landscape. There's a committee that's been established called JKPDA. For short, it's a committee that's looking at the whole funding landscape for research, development, and commercialization. Okay. There are 46 government agencies under 16 different ministries that are giving out funding, grant funding for research, development, and commercialization. So 3 years ago, when this first started, we were looking at how to actually rationalize this to, first of all, reduce duplication, have some focus, look at where the money is going, what happens to it, what sort of outcomes are achieved, and also have a balance between how much goes to basic research, applied research, pre-commercialization, commercialization.
I mean, it sounds like a long and complex process. So I want to understand is where do local investors usually fall through in that long process? Which part is it that's most critical?
That's a very, very important question. The industry or local investor, they a bit reluctant to fund product development. You see, if basic research costs you 10 ringgit, product development might cost you 100 ringgit. So this product development that needs the contribution from the industry or investors. And this is where very like. For information, these 5 research universities contributed to, in terms of return on investment, multi-billion for the last 4 or 5 years. And this again was not, well known or well, received for some reason. If let's say one staff or student sent to overseas to make PhD, it will cost you 1 million to 1.5 million. And with the establishment of research university, in view of becoming a developed nation 2020, we did another 11,475 PhD candidate. Imagine if one PhD that the country needs costs you 1.5 million, how much money the government needs to spend. So with the establishment of research university, we can save a lot of currency exchange. So these 5 research universities contributed to about more than 80% of any patent commercialization products. And we research universities are not only, commercialization, research product is very big definition. We are now a solution provider, a package. Mm-hmm. This is not being, again, known, very well known, especially in Malaysia. Consultancy also, providing a knowledge to the company is also part and parcel of commercialization. And this was not, taken up. I don't know why.
I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the triple helix model, each of the triple helix components have to do their part. Okay. Now, if you look at the policy side, with the new education master plan, I think there is going to be, or it's already started, tremendous change in the overall university ecosystem. I mean, if you look at, I think chapter 2 or one of the chapters in the plan, there will now be different streams for professionals in the universities. You're going to have the research stream, meaning that you join the university to be researchers, and you become professors because of your research. And there's going to be an administration stream, meaning you are professional deans, 4 tracks. And there's the professional stream, meaning that people like you can join the university and become professor even though you don't have a PhD. So I think on the policy side, the government has actually done quite a lot in terms of making it easier for universities to interact professionally with the industry. Now, within the university itself, I think a lot has changed. A lot can be done. But there are differences between the more established universities, mm-hmm. those with long experience in technology transfer and commercialization, and those that are just starting. So sometimes we tend to lump all this together and say, here is a number. I don't think that's quite fair. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, I think, as I mentioned, we already have a successful model of collaboration in the oil palm industry. Why is it successful? Because the industry actually actively engaged with the policymaker, which is 1/3 of the triple helix, and the research institute, which is the other partner of the triple helix. Meaning that the industry actively engaged. In the old days, when I was working in the oil palm industry, even now, the MPOB or the old PORIM, they have a technical advisory committee made up by the big players and the smallholders represented in those TAC, and they plan the research together. Yeah? But these are not replicated in the other industries.
Well, we're starting to see that.
Yes, we're starting to see that
industry,
in electronics.
Okay, all right, I'll have to take this discussion to the next commercial break, but when we come back later, maybe we can talk about how, okay, now that we have all these success models, these success stories, but how do you replicate that, like you mentioned, to the rest of the research communities and universities? That we will discuss after the break. Stay with us.
You don't need to think about the energy that makes our lives possible, because we do. We're ExxonMobil, and powering the world responsibly is our job. Because boiling an egg isn't as simple as just boiling an egg. Life takes energy. Energy lives here.
Welcome back to the 11th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Now, I'd like to go straight to Dato'. Earlier, we talked about how we have a lot of success stories, but, our best inventors may not be the best marketers, right? So, on that front, what kind of support is needed to improve the confidence of industries towards the universities in terms of research and collaboration?
Well, I think, again, I will go back to positioning of our product, because that's marketing. And actually, we have had, well, if not had a lot, but we have had quite a few research products which have been very successful. For example, the rubber wood industry. People tend to like, well, rubber wood, yeah, but before the rubber wood industry was researched by FRIM, and it was at 300,000 ringgit research. There was no rubber wood industry. But FRIM actually found a solution to the problem of actually treating the rubber wood to turn it into furniture. And now it blossomed into, I think it's 10 billion or so industry. So that is an example of successful commercialization of research. But if you ask 10 people, you do a straw poll, most people wouldn't be able to quote that. They wouldn't even know about this successful creation of a new industry based on rubber wood by FRIM, for example. So I think there is a need to, one is we need to communicate this, because at the end of the day, people need to feel confident about the technology that has been developed. Yeah? And again, in terms of context, a lot of people dismiss the oil palm industry, but that's a good example. Now we are doing this with Crest, the electronics industry. So I think all parties, the government, the universities, and the industry, we need to work together to showcase what have we done together, which is good and successful.
And who's taking that lead?
Now, on the university side, okay, there has been a lot of effort by the research universities to make promotions, communications effort to showcase whatever that they have.
We have Innovation Commercialization Center. We have in all universities, we have university holding companies, a commercial arm to do that. And then what's lacking is the perception and the mindset. This is all the homegrown technology, If we are not the one who use it, who else? So this is where the university researchers feel a bit disappointed. Whenever we develop something, I've gone through this, my career more than 20 years as a lecturer and researcher. I've gone through all this. We develop at par products in university, but whenever you want to market it, the industry is still thinking of overseas products.
Okay, I want to get to Biro on that, because what are the factors hampering that initiative to want to work with our local talents?
Yes, in terms of the industry side, there would be, like I mentioned just now, they are not aware of our IPs that we are churning. So we actually, the universities are churning out some good quality IPs. However, the number is not enough. So we need to actually improve the quantity and the quality of our research, both applied and fundamental. And in order for industries to take this up, we need to industries or GLCs, whoever they are working together with, the technology transfer officers or the innovation officers in some universities you call them, they should have a clear strategy in terms of promoting this. So if we are just going to promote these IPs in local road shows, are we serving the objective? Are we really reaching out to the right audiences? Are we creating the right awareness? So we need to actually set that strategy. We should allocate a budget, allocate a strategy to market this. Are we pitching it the right way? Because if you're coming from the university or the research side and you're going to just talk about technical side of this innovation, they won't be interested. Are you talking about dollar and cents? What can this innovation bring to the table for these companies? How big it can go? Is this a disruptive technology? These are the elements that you need to pitch to these entities or to attract the investment for these IPs. So is the university or the researchers well positioned? If they're not, where should they get the training from?
Okay.
We need to segregate, when we talk about the industry, the GLCs. What are the challenges of the GLCs working with the universities? Because they are different size, they are different than the SMEs. Now, the SMEs, we may or may not include depending on who we talk to, the startup. So maybe we should actually look at how are the startups working with the academia, how are the traditional SMEs working with academia, and how are the GLCs with their partly national mission work with the academia. So these are different components of the industries, and we cannot lump them together, because one would expect naturally for the GLC to have the money, and by right, or maybe I'm wrong, but to have some appetite for risk, because it's impossible anywhere in the world. No universities will develop a product ready to sell. Nowhere in the world.
So that's really about understanding what the market needs.
No, in the sense that if you are talking about university, like say IP, any IP which is developed, it is based on research. Once you reach the stage where you actually commercialize it, the patent is not there. There may be industrial design. So to bring from that patent to commercialization, that's not the job of universities actually. Yeah. So now we have three different components of the industries. The startups, their risk appetite is very high.
Different breed altogether.
Very high, right? But again, as you mentioned, the taxi case. Now we need to first. A lot of people say, why did they go south and raise the money? No. First, we must look at how did they get funded in the Malaysian scenario, because the environment allows them to be funded. But if you reach a certain stage, you need to go out. But you do not deny the contribution of the initial funder. Now, Mark and I, we have a company which is called Sentinext. It's developing the first world-class vaccine, which is using a virus-like particle to address head, foot, and mouth disease. It's world-class, it's the first. It's a bivalent vaccine. No other product in the world at this point in time. Now, we have spent, up to now, $30–40 million. We will not be able to add another $100–200 million. We will need to go out of Malaysia. But if you see the same case as this My Taxi, people will say, you see, Malaysian environment doesn't support.
I'll have to take this discussion again to our final commercial. But when we come back, let's talk about how do you ensure that those support are in place for the different stages towards innovation and then towards commercialization.
Working capital is another issue.
Okay, to that we will come back with Mark later. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the 11th Merdeka Award Roundtable. Now, going into this final segment, I'd like to get your views about what are some of the sectors, areas that Malaysians can focus on in terms of university and industry collaboration. Dato'.
Well, I would say, for example, we have very good membrane research in this country. And Prof. Fauzi, he's here. I mean, sorry, that Prof. No, he's an advisor to Saudi Arabian government, for example. His research work, as I mentioned just now in the Scopus record, his group is #1. So we should actually we should look at all this strength that we have and flip on it. We really go and look at it, what can we do with it? And membrane is a very high-end technology. It's a very small elite group, but very high-end, very high-tech. And again, if you look at UTM, there's the vibration center, again, world-class.
Noise and vibration.
That's why in the beginning when you asked me, I said I will separate between commercialization of IP, which is very long-term, very difficult, very expensive sometimes, and technology transfer across the continuum. Because technology transfer can occur through the students, but it can occur through consultancy, advisory, and the rest of things that happen, lab services even. Yeah? So I think those are the things that when we talk to the marketplace, the universities need to focus on. Because part of the problem is because even in Parliament, the question has always been the same. How much money we have spent on research, how much we have commercialized in terms of product. But nobody has asked actually how much services have we rendered to the industry. What are the value in terms of their return on investment? These are the things that we need to focus on, because then we have that feel good. I mean, the confidence in the academia. Because whether you like it or not, those who are doing the pitching are the academia, not the industry. The academia is doing the pitching.
Malaysia needs to identify what are the key sub-clusters that it needs to work on. And for example, we do know that, for example, Motorola has Malaysia as their global center for research in walkie-talkies. We then need to ensure that on the academia side, we have also the same specialization to support that sub-cluster. We have now some of the largest solar panel manufacturers. Again, how do we ensure that we again have that same cluster? So again, I think it's about ensuring that there is that alignment between industry and academia. And I think initiatives like what Mark mentioned, like CRESS, I think one way to, shall we say, kickstart, because sometimes it's a chicken and egg, industry says why industry not doing it, industry say why universities not doing it. One of the areas we've done is that like CRESS is a co-funded model. So I think where government provides some funds, but it needs to have a matching fund from industry to, in a sense, decide together which are the ones that we
well,
go
on that
ahead
note, looking at our discussion, it does seem that these investments are still being led by GLCs, the government. How do you get more private sector on board?
Well, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning, there are a couple of initiatives that have just started in the past year, Steinbeis and PPRN. Steinbeis, what Steinbeis does is it provides a platform where industry can actually come to Steinbeis and say, I've got this problem which I'm working on, I need some expert help. So Steinbeis will go into the network and find the right expert, whether it's a researcher from a university, a research institute, or even from the private sector, and bring them together. And under this model, PPRN as well, which is providing a research network from the universities, the researchers, let's say they're working in a university, they are allowed to spend 20% of their time taking on these sorts of projects. So that is hopefully going to provide more organized linkage between industry and university researcher. So by the individual researcher taking on these sorts of projects, they spend, if we are allowed to spend 1/5 of their time doing this, they get paid for it as well. They get a better insight into what industry needs.
To incentivize both parties,
yes.
really.
Yeah.
Right.
And for the company. Yeah.
The private sector have to have their skin in the game.
Right.
Yeah. But like you said earlier, private investors are still more comfortable investing in brick and mortar companies, property development, something that gives them a definite return. In terms of research and development, it's still a big bet.
Yeah. So from university point of view, we would like to see a lot more like technology scouting, like what Dr. Halim, MTTC have done a great job. They scout technology from all over Malaysia's university and research institute, and then incubate them. They not even scout the technology, but they scout also, they train the future CEO. Again, as you said, GLC. So if the industry can have like, scouting a footballer, if they do that, they very short term, I'm very sure the benefit that they can generate for the company is huge.
In in terms of encouraging the industries, right, to participate more or take it up, I would say maybe we could actually adopt models like in UK, like the patent box, where the tax incentives are given to companies who takes up IPs or patents for commercialization. So this encourages even not just GLCs but local SMEs to participate. So this kind of measures would be attractive and should be looked into and implemented. Yeah.
Speaking of SMEs, I still feel that there is a perception again, lack of motivation to innovate. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Well, actually, again, I will have to re-emphasize my point that we need to differentiate between commercialization of IP and actual technology know-how transfer. Now, you look at SMEs, they have been doing it for years and years, being a conventional company, and you want to turn them into a technology company overnight, that's not going to happen. You want them to acquire a patent and commercialize it, that's not going to happen. But what PPRN is doing is that we want to make them comfortable working with universities. Mm-hmm. But they have to have their skin in the game. You can't give them a grant.
Engagement first,
slowly.
Okay.
Like the PPRN, we started with 70-30 and then we moved to 50-50, in terms of the fund needed. So that SMEs, it's a continuous engagement process. Now, of course, the startup is a different ball game altogether, because they start with technology in mind. Mm-hmm. So that's different. And again, I will refer to the GLC. Now, if you look at the GLC and you check how many technologies they have commercialized, and this is maybe the crux of the problem, because all the large GLCs have their own research centers, and we can actually check how many they have commercialized. Not so much from universities, but their own research, how many they have commercialized. Now, because of that, it sort of gives an impression that the local technology development capability is not good enough because they keep buying from Huawei, for example, or whatever that,
So you're saying that even our own businesses are not innovating enough, is that it?
That's not quite true, because with platform ventures, we see a lot of companies, our local Malaysian companies, under the high impact program too. They actually approach us with lots of innovative ideas, proof of concept, even at late stage proof of concept. And these ideas are really good, and we actually fund them under the high impact program too. It's a program under the SME Master Plan 2012-2020. So we have funded about 45 innovative companies, and these companies are really, so we look into a few angles, in terms of the company structure, the technology, the innovation itself, the market sense, the commercial viability of this technology, the IP potential. So when we say our Malaysian companies are not there, it's not true. They are moving towards there, and it's actually very encouraging to see lots of local players not only coming up with their own IPs, but they are licensing it from universities. So for example, in total, we have made about 65 licensing deals. And this actually shows a positive growth towards this whole technology transfer.
In the space of just 1 year.
Yes.
Because Platcom just started in the middle of last year. And
accelerating that process moving forward.
Well, we see, since starting, they've seen hundreds of proposals coming in. So there's some very interesting ones. And, as I mentioned, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. The struggle to commercialization can be very long. Even when you start selling, what happens after that? You start to have issues with working capital as well. You go to a bank and the bank says, oh, you don't have any track record, I can't fund you. So these are some of the issues that are being looked at as well. How can we get the banks to also take a different approach in terms of how you assess lending to startups and SMEs? Because you need to look not just at tangible assets, you need to look at intellectual capital.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps a lot of it is about culture, about understanding each other, and perhaps to make this message, to marriage work, I guess, between industry and academia. We'd like to see more talent, I guess cross-fertilizing. Probably need to see more of lecturers spending time in industry and more of industry spending time in universities. I mean, even our survey of the World Bank showed only under 3% of companies have even had any experience of having adjunct lecturers.
I think I agree with Johan. We are not as bad as what we are portrayed to be. We're not as good as what we want to be. right?
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there, but the thing is that everybody has to have a shared vision.
Okay.
I mean, we need to realize that, we have to move forward, we have to acquire, develop technologies, and people have to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Dato, for wrapping that up nicely. We've come to the end of the show. Once again, thank you so much for being part of this discussion. And I'd also like to thank Marini on 57 for hosting us today. And to you viewers at home, if you have any feedback or comment, you can look us up on Facebook. That's Merdeka Award. Once again, my name is Cynthia. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
This program was brought to you by the Merdeka Award, an initiative to promote excellence by ExxonMobil, Petronas, and Shell.